Welcome to Surface Knowledge, the only podcast that provides you with useless information for a useful reason. Never again be stuck without an interesting tidbit or fun fact in any social situation. Here's your host, Max Curtin.
Well, hello there. Welcome back, everyone, to Surface Knowledge, the podcast that delivers just enough to impress in 30 minutes or less. Now, let's start this episode with a question, shall we? How often do you think about the Roman Empire? You've probably seen the trend, men claiming to think about Rome constantly. And while it might sound like a joke, the truth is I actually do have a lot of friends who are obsessed with this topic matter. And I think it's because this wasn't just an empire, it was the empire. A civilization that lasted over 1,000 years, stretched across 3 different continents, and influenced everything from our roads and laws to language, religion, and even our plumbing. And that's why, my friends, I'm absolutely terrified to do this episode. So terrified, in fact, I haven't done an episode in 3 months. It was a separate issue. It's summer. I want to enjoy it. You try recording in here. It's hot. Anyway, we're back. I'm excited. But I do not think about the Roman Empire multiple times a day. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm wired a bit weird in that sense. But this is why I've had to pour a lot of research into this. And I think I've rewritten this episode at least 3 times, and I really hope that I've done it justice. But please do remember, before you come after me in the comments, sending me hate mail, this is surface knowledge. This is approximately 1,480 years of history in under 30 minutes. Pray for me. This episode isn't for the historians or the reenactors, this is for the rest of us. The one who vaguely know that Julius Caesar got stabbed. The ones that aren't quite sure what the Colosseum was really for. The ones who want a surface knowledge of how a scrappy city-state became one of the most powerful forces in world history and why we're still talking about it 2 millennia later. So from the founding of Rome to the fall of the Western Empire, let's dive in. This is your surface knowledge of the Roman Empire. Now, before we get to the empire, we need to know the context of how we can go from a kingdom to a republic and then to collapse. So I want to start at the beginning, not with fact, but with myth. Because like all great civilizations, Rome gave itself an origin story worth remembering. According to legend, the story centers on 2 twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, who were abandoned as infants and raised by a she-wolf. Romulus, after a dispute with his brother, killed Remus and founded the city of Rome in 753 BCE, naming it after himself. And descended from the Trojan hero Aeneas, Romulus embodied Rome's sense of destiny and divine favor, a belief that would echo throughout its history. In its earliest form, Rome was a monarchy. It was ruled by a series of 7 kings. The first few were likely mythical or semi-legendary, but as time progresses, historical elements begin to emerge. These kings helped shape the city-state, building walls, organizing armies, creating early religious and political institutions. The 7th and final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, also known as Tarquin the Proud, was a tyrant. His downfall came after a horrific event. His son's assault of a noblewoman named Lucretia, which triggered a revolt. This act, according to tradition, so disgusted the Roman people that they overthrew the monarchy and vowed never to be ruled by kings again. In 509 BCE, they established the Roman Republic. The Republic was Rome's attempt at shared power. 2 annually elected consuls led the government, advised by a senate composed of aristocrats, known as the patricians. But Rome wasn't a democracy in the modern sense. Power remained tightly held among the elite. The lower classes, known as the plebeians, had to fight for generations to gain basic rights. Hang on, that kind of sounds exactly like modern democracy. Anyway, one of the first major reforms was the 12 Tables. This was a written code of laws created around 450 BCE that guaranteed legal transparency. Over time, political roles opened up to plebeians, including positions like tribunes, who had the power to veto unjust decisions. This push and pull between classes defined early republican politics. Rome, however, wasn't content to govern just itself. Its ambition and military prowess turned it from a city-state into a spiraling regional power. As Rome consolidated power in central Italy, it clashed with neighboring peoples like the Etruscans, the Samnites, but the turning point came with the Punic Wars. Hannibal, the brilliant Carthaginian general, famously crossed the Alps with war elephants and terrorized the Italian countryside, but Rome held strong. Under the leadership of Scipio Africanus, they eventually defeated Hannibal at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. Victory in the Punic Wars gave Rome control over large swathes of the western Mediterranean, Sicily, Spain, North Africa, and opened the door to further conquests in Greece, Macedonia, and beyond. The Republic had become an empire in everything but name. But expansion brought instability. Enormous wealth flowed into Rome, but it wasn't evenly distributed. Powerful families amassed fortunes from conquest, while ordinary citizens, especially soldiers, returned home to find their farms ruined and their jobs taken by enslaved laborers. Enter the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Marius, tribunes who tried to implement land reform to help the poor. Both were assassinated by political opponents, but their deaths marked the start of an increasingly violent and polarized republic. Two key figures embodied this change: Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Marius, a populist, reformed the army by allowing landless men to enlist, effectively creating a standing army loyal to its commander. Sulla, a conservative aristocrat, responded with brutality. He marched his army into Rome twice and became dictator, purging enemies and rewriting laws. Rome was still technically a republic, but now military power was the deciding force. The stage was set now for even greater ambition. During this very volatile period, another shock to the system came from a very unexpected source: Spartacus. A gladiator and former soldier, Spartacus led a massive slave uprising in 73 BCE, the Third Servile War. At its peak, his army numbered between 70,000 and 120,000 enslaved people, defeating Roman forces multiple times. Although eventually crushed by Crassus, Spartacus became a symbol of resistance, both feared and admired. His rebellion showed just how fractured Roman society had become and how thin the veneer of control really was. Into this chaos stepped Julius Caesar. A gifted orator, general, and politician, Caesar had powerful allies in Crassus and Pompey. Forming the first triumvirate, together they dominated Roman politics. Caesar's military campaigns in Gaul, which is modern-day France and Belgium, were spectacular, expanding Roman territory and earning him immense popularity. But his success threatened the Senate and Pompey. When ordered to disband his army and return to Rome, Caesar made his infamous move, crossing the Rubicon River in 49 BCE and launching a civil war. He emerged victorious. In 44 BCE, Caesar was named dictator for life, a title that alarmed traditionalists who still clung to the dream of a republic. That same year, a group of senators led by Brutus and Cassius assassinated him on the Ides of March, believing they were saving the Republic. Quick spoiler alert, they weren't. Instead of restoring order, Caesar's death unleashed further chaos. His adopted heir Octavian joined forces with Mark Antony and Lepidus to form the Second Triumvirate. Together, they hunted down Caesar's killers and turned on one another. The final blow came at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra, securing sole control of Rome. 2 years later, he was granted the title Augustus by the Senate, becoming Rome's first emperor. The Republic was dead, not with a bang, but with a carefully managed transition that left Rome with a single ruler and a brand new political system. The Roman Empire had begun.
What do you get when you ask smart, curious people 5 completely random questions? You get real stories, weird tangents, and conversations they've never had before. I'm Danny Brown, and on 5 Random Questions, I invite creators, entrepreneurs, and fascinating humans to skip the pitches and talking points and just show up as themselves. There's no script, just 5 surprising prompts dropped throughout a relaxed, unpredictable conversation. Think laughter, awkward hypotheticals, personal confessions, and the kind of answers that can only come from being caught completely off guard. Every guest also flips the mic and asks me a random question of their own, because fair's fair. If Hot Ones and WTF with Mark Maron had a podcast baby, this would be it, minus the hot sauce but with all the spice. I look forward to welcoming you to 5 Random Questions, where the conversations are always real, sometimes ridiculous, but never boring.
The Republic was gone, but Rome was far from finished. In fact, under its first emperor, Augustus, Rome would enter a golden age of power, expansion, and relative peace known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. This would last for over 200 years. Octavius, born Gaius Octavius, was more than just a skilled politician. He was a master of image. He never called himself king or dictator. Instead, he styled himself as princeps, or first citizen, cleverly preserving the appearance, and I will say appearance, of republican traditions while holding absolute power. Under his rule, Rome was transformed. He reformed the tax system, established a permanent army, launched ambitious building projects, and positioned himself as the moral leader of the Roman people. He even claimed to have found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. This blend of military power, administrative genius, and propaganda set the blueprint for emperors to follow. And with Augustus at the helm, the empire expanded into Egypt, the Balkans, Hispania, and further into Central Europe. At its height, the Roman Empire covered over 5 million square kilometers, stretching from northern Britain to the edges of Mesopotamia. It controlled roughly a quarter of the world's population at the time, a vast multi-ethnic domain linked by roads, laws, and military might. To maintain such a massive territory, Rome relied on a few key pillars. The Roman army, which was highly trained, well-equipped, and disciplined. Soldiers were often stationed in provinces for decades, building roads, forts, and towns as they went. Serving in the army was also a path to citizenship for many non-Romans. Roman citizenship, originally exclusive but gradually expanded. By 212 CE, Emperor Caracalla granted citizenship to nearly all free men in the empire, a move designed to unify the population and increase tax revenue. And finally, we have infrastructure, Rome's most iconic legacy. Over 250,000 miles of roads connected the empire, along with aqueducts supplying clean water and public baths, forums, and amphitheaters providing civic life. The line of emperors that followed Augustus is a roller coaster of personalities, some brilliant, but others quite often terrifying. We have Tiberius, Augustus's reluctant stepson, effective but moody and eventually withdrew from public life. Next, we have Caligula, known for his extravagance and alleged madness. Rumors include appointing his horse as a consul, though that's probably more myth than fact, but I do love the idea of it. We next have Claudius, seen as weak due to a speech impediment, but proved to be a surprisingly competent administrator. He expanded Rome into Britain. Then we have Nero, a textbook tyrant, accused of playing the ire as Rome burned, persecuting Christians and indulging in excess. His death ended the Julio-Claudian line. Then we have Vespasian, a stabilizer. He brought the empire back from chaos and began construction on the Colosseum, which started in AD 72 and was completed in AD 80 under his successor and heir, Titus. Then we have Trajan, the empire's greatest expander. Under his rule, Rome reached its maximum territorial extent. And then we have Hadrian, a traveler and a builder. He consolidated borders, constructed Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and rebuilt part of Athens and Jerusalem. These emperors revealed the balancing act of imperial power, managing distant territories, domestic politics, and their own image while navigating ever-present threats or rebellion or assassination. Despite the authoritarian structure, many Romans, especially those in cities, enjoyed relative stability and prosperity. Rome itself had over 1 million people. We're talking bustling markets, temples, theaters, and more. The Colosseum could seat over 50,000 people and hosted everything from gladiator battles to mock naval battles. These public spectacles weren't just entertainment, they were political tools used to pacify and unite the populace. The Forum was the heart of civic life. People gathered to shop, debate, pray, and gossip. Latin was the most dominant language in the West, while Greek held sway in the East. Daily life varied enormously depending on the class you're in. We obviously have the patricians, which were wealthy elites with large homes, slaves, and political influence. Then we have the plebeians, who were commoners, often craftsmen, farmers, or laborers. The freedmen were former slaves who had earned or been granted freedom, but were still limited in status. Then you have the slaves, who were the backbone of Roman labor, enslaved people who worked in households, farms, mines, and even schools. Yet even among elites, Romans' values prized gravitas, pietas, which means duty, and virtus, virtue. Success meant honoring one's family, God, and the state. Early Roman religion was polytheistic and heavily influenced by the Greeks. The gods of Olympus became the gods of Rome, just with different names: Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Neptune, etc. Emperors were often deified after death, and emperor worship became a unifying state religion, especially in the provinces. But over time, religious tolerance began to wear thin, especially with the rise of Christianity. Early Christians refused to worship Roman gods or the emperor, which made them suspect in the eyes of the authority. Periodic persecutions occurred, most famously under Nero and later Diocletian. But the movement grew. By the early 4th century, Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity after reportedly seeing a vision before battle. He issued the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, legalizing Christianity across the empire. By the end of the century, Theodosius I made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, and pagan worship was banned. The old Roman gods, once central to public life, were now history. By the late 3rd century, the Roman Empire was showing its age. The mighty machinery that had once conquered continents was now straining under its own weight. Corruption, economic troubles, military overreach, all of these played a role. But what's most surprising is how long the empire did still manage to survive. Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome spiraled into now what's called the crisis of the 3rd century. In just 50 years, over 24 emperors came and went, many meeting violent ends. Civil war was nearly constant. Provinces broke away, the empire fractured into competing regions, like the Gallic Empire and the Palmyrene Empire. External pressures didn't help either. Gothic tribes crossed the Danube while Persians pressed in from the east. Disease and famine thinned the population. Inflation spiraled out of control, coins were debased and trade suffered. For a moment, it truly looked like Rome might collapse entirely. But then came Diocletian, one of Rome's last great stabilizers. He realized the empire was too big to manage alone, so he made a very bold move. He divided it. In 285 CE, Diocletian created the Tetrarchy, which means rule by 4. He governed the eastern half with a co-emperor, and each of them appointed a junior empire, or, came to be known, Caesar, to assist and eventually succeed them. In theory, this would ensure smooth transition and localized control. In practice, it did slow decline, but it didn't stop it. Still, Diocletian brought temporary order. He froze prices, reorganized taxes, and increased the size of the army. But when he retired, which, by the way, is the only Roman emperor ever to do so voluntarily, the Tetrarchy fell apart almost immediately. After an absolutely brutal power struggle, Constantine the Great emerged as sole ruler in 324 CE. A military genius and savvy politician, he made two massive changes that reshaped history. He converted to Christianity, ending the persecution of Christians and making the religion a legitimate and soon dominant force across the empire. And he also moved the capital to the Greek city of Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. It was better positioned for trade, wealth, and defense, a clear shift of power from west to east. So while Rome remained culturally symbolic, the true center of imperial power had moved east, and in many ways, it never came back. The Western Roman Empire continued to crumble. Poor leadership, a shrinking tax base, and ongoing invasions from Germanic tribes took their toll. In 410 CE, the unthinkable happened. Rome was sacked by the Visigoths under Alaric. It was the first time in 800 years the city had fallen to a foreign enemy. The psychological blow was massive. Other tribes followed. Vandals, Huns, Ostrogoths. The empire lost control of Britain, Gaul, Spain, North Africa. Each loss weakened Rome's hold, and each new emperor seemed less able to reverse the tide. In 476 CE, a Germanic general named Odoacer deposed the child emperor Romulus Augustulus. No bloodbath, no dramatic collapse, just a quiet end to the Western line of emperors. Many historians mark this as the official fall, in quotes, of the Western Roman Empire, but the truth is, it had been dying for a long time. While the West disintegrated, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, continued on. It had better defenses, a stronger economy, and more centralized control. Centered in Constantinople, it kept Roman law, Roman identity, and Roman culture alive for another 1,000 years. The Byzantines considered themselves Roman until the very end. Their empire wouldn't fall until 1453, when the Ottomans finally breached Constantinople. In short here, the Roman Empire didn't vanish overnight, it fragmented. The western half fell in 476 CE, but the eastern half endured. Christianity replaced the old gods, Latin evolved into new languages, and Rome, the idea, never truly died. The Roman Empire may have fallen, but Rome itself never really disappeared. Its fingerprints are still everywhere. From the languages that we speak, to the buildings we live in, to the laws that govern our lives. Rome didn't just conquer lands, it helped shape civilization. Let's take language first of all, Latin. The language of the Romans, it never vanished, it evolved, splintering into what we now call the Romance languages: Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian. Even English, while Germanic in root, is loaded with Latin-based words, especially in science, law, and medicine. Roman law was equally enduring. The body of civil law, compiled under Justinian I in the Byzantine Empire, became a cornerstone for legal systems in Europe. Many modern legal codes, especially civil law traditions, still draw on Roman concepts like contracts, citizenships, and due process. Step into any major city and you'll still see the influence of Roman architecture. Domes, arches, aqueducts, Colosseum-style stadiums. The Romans perfected the engineering behind these forms. They invented concrete, built vast road networks, and introduced urban planning that's echoed in city layouts today. Their roads were so well made that some are still in use. The phrase "all roads lead to Rome" isn't just poetic, it's reflected in a literal network of over 250,000 miles of carefully constructed Roman highways connecting their empire from Britain to Egypt. Aqueducts, meanwhile, revolutionized public health. Clean water could travel dozens of miles into cities, feeding public fountains, baths, and private homes. Sanitation, by ancient standards, was remarkably advanced. Before Rome, Christianity was a fringe sect within Judaism. After Constantine's conversion and Theodosius I making it official state religion, it became the dominant spiritual force in Europe even today. The Roman Catholic Church, centered in the Vatican City, is a direct legacy of the Roman Empire. Its hierarchical structure, use of Latin, and even the architecture of its churches all echo imperial roots. Popes would eventually be seen as spiritual successors to emperors. And Rome was not the first empire, but it became the template for those that followed. The idea of a powerful, centralized state that could manage diverse peoples over vast distances, that came from Rome. So did the notion of a republic, with elected officials, senates, and civic duty. The Roman Republic's influence on political thinkers like Montesquieu, Madison, and Jefferson can't be overstated. The founders of the United States directly reference Roman models when shaping their new government. The US Capitol building, its domes, its columns, and Latin inscriptions are pure Roman inspiration. During the Renaissance, artists and thinkers looked back to Rome for inspiration. The words Tsar in Russia and Kaiser in Germany both derive from Caesar, emphasizing how Rome became shorthand for supreme power. Mussolini tried to evoke Roman greatness with his fascist ideology. Hollywood as well has repeatedly mined Roman history for stories of grandeur and collapse. Couple of the most ordinary things that have Roman roots. The calendar we use is Julian-based. July and August, they're named after Julius Caesar and Augustus. Roman numerals are still used on clocks and movie credits. The Latin alphabet forms the basis of most Western writing systems, and even wedding rings that are worn on the forefinger stem from Roman belief about a vein of love running to the heart. In the end, Rome wasn't just an empire. It was a civilizational blueprint. It showed how diverse people could be brought under a single rule, how infrastructure and law could unify distant lands, and how ideas, good and bad, could ripple through centuries. It left us colosseums and concrete, yes, but also questions about power, about the fragility of peace, and about what it means to build something that lasts. Because perhaps the greatest lesson of Rome is this: empires fall, legacies endure. There we go, folks. I did it. Hopefully. I like to imagine you're all applauding right now. Probably not. But we just did the history of the Roman Empire in under 30 minutes. Now, you don't have to think about the Roman Empire daily, but if you do, you're going to have a little surface knowledge to go along with it. So thank you very much for tuning in on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, share it. You can find Surface Knowledge on Instagram, Threads, YouTube, and Blue Sky at Surface Knowledge Pod. You can also get in touch with the show at gottill5@gmail.com. Let me know if you've got a favorite Emperor secret crush. I'll take a future topic suggestion as well. I really hope you join me next time when we'll be gaining a surface knowledge of secret societies.
You've been listening to the Surface Knowledge Podcast, part of the GT5 network. Be sure to subscribe and rate on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. We'll see you back here soon for another episode. Until next time, stay curious.